And for more on the crisis in Syria, we're joined by Edmund Ghareeb, a Middle East scholar and expert. Thank you so much for joining us. So the UN Security Council expected to try again and vote on a ceasefire on Saturday. Russia has issues, though, with what's been proposed so far. What is it that they're disputing? And if you can, just give us any idea if you think they can get anything done.
I think that's a very important issue. The Russians want to make sure that there are guarantees that we are not going to see a repetition of what has been going on, where we see attacks from eastern Ghouta on Damascus, which makes it very difficult. Whenever there is a crisis or a small crisis, we see these attacks on Damascus, and what happens is that people, like there have been reports, are fleeing from the neighborhoods which are close to the eastern Ghouta and the capital. That means that you cannot develop, you cannot have economic development, you cannot have stability, and it affects the lives of everyday citizens in the capital of the country. So they want to make sure that particularly groups such as al-Nusra, which is Al-Qaeda, and Jaish al-Islam, or the groups that fight with al-Nusra, are not going to remain. And they want guarantees from the parties. This is very difficult to do, but at the same time, the message is that they cannot continue with the situation as it is today, where this area is the soft underbelly of Damascus.
So it's a lot more complicated than people think. They're,
right.
Seeing this emotional
Absolutely.
outpouring there. And we've seen ceasefires before. If they do agree on one, would it be observed? Who would enforce it? And would it really help the humanitarian situation on the ground?
There's no doubt that there is a humanitarian crisis. It's both in eastern Ghouta and it's in Damascus. It's also in Afrin, for example. So this is a legitimate question. The question, however, is, well, what about the population of Damascus? There are close to 5 million people in Damascus. Not every time there is a small incident or there is a crisis, we see attack on the civilian areas in Damascus. Well, the Syrian government basically cannot tolerate this. There is increasing pressure from the people in Damascus on the government to try to find a solution for this. And I think it's also important because one of the things that we need to know is that there are still two important pockets for the opposition around Damascus. Everything else has already been regained. The government has regained control over all the other areas that were controlled by the opposition. There's still eastern Ghouta. There is Al-Qaeda there. There's an army of Islam there. There's God's core as well. These are radical organizations. The other area is in Yarmouk, where there is fighting going on now between ISIS and al-Nusra. The two are fighting against each other, but this is also an area to the south where the government is also threatened from that area once the fighting between these two groups ends.
And very quickly, you mentioned Afrin. How is the Syrian government managing the situation there with Turkey and the Kurds?
Well, this has been very difficult, but so far it seems that the Syrian government has made some gains in the sense that at least it was able to get the Kurds, who have not been hesitant or resistant to allowing government control into some of the Kurdish areas under the control of the Syrian Democratic Forces, which are mainly Kurdish and allied with Washington. But Washington finds itself in a very difficult spot between one ally, Turkey, which is a NATO country, and the Kurds are the other allies. So this has allowed, because Washington has not been willing to support Afrin, the Kurds in Afrin, while it says it will support the Kurds in Manbij and in Raqqa. And so this has allowed the Syrian government to provide the kind of support that the Kurds need, and this will strengthen the Kurds. And maybe it might open the door for new negotiations between the Kurds and the central government.
We'll have to wait and see. Edmund Ghareeb, always great to see you. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you very much.